I think the real motivator was the fact that I loved learning. I read voraciously from an early period in my childhood. I loved to write. I wanted to continue to pursue those activities, and I had so much pleasure from them that I wanted to bring that love of reading and writing to others.
Awesome. And tell me, you've been teaching at Greensboro College for 14 years.
14 years.
How has it changed from 14 years ago to today?
That's a good question. How has it changed? Well, we have the Reynolds Center, for one, and I think we've made a lot of good changes in the physical campus by expanding. Mm-hmm. I think the faculty has continued to grow and provide a vibrant array of specialties. For example, we recently hired somebody who does does a lot with visual media and online art installations, and these are things that really wouldn't have been common 14 years ago. So.
And you teach, you're an English professor, so tell me, 14 years ago, how have we changed in communication-wise?
Well, social media, of course, is one way, and I do teach new media studies as well here. I think that in the classroom, for example, there used to be, long ago, note passing, and nowadays what students do to communicate in and outside a classroom is, of course, with the computer, not paper. And so I think that connectedness that students feel through social media, Twitter, email, Facebook especially, has changed the culture that students experience, and thus it's changed the culture for professors too.
And really, how has it changed for your profession?
In English?
Yeah.
Or writing, I guess, because like the study of, a lot of people, for example, ask me questions, well, do you think that students' writing has gotten much worse in the age of messaging, text messaging? And my answer is usually it's different. It's not worse. Sometimes students don't capitalize and they have to be reminded to. But it's really just a different, it's a difference in quality, and it's not necessarily a change in writing in that way.
Do we invest too much of our time and too much of our energy into social media nowadays?
It's interesting that you asked that, because I recently asked my students to write on this idea that perhaps we do too much with social media. And the example that I gave was from a May 2011 Chronicle of Education article, in which the author pointed out students feel stressed now from having to be connected all the time. And it was surprising how many students agreed with this author that the imperative to stay connected is almost too much now. And they recognize all the tremendous gains in being able to contact people far away, in accessing Wikipedia and other knowledge sources. But there is some real pressure there for them in terms of having to be on all the time. The students say, if I don't know what's going on Facebook, I'm going to feel left out.
Can you lay out some of the pros of social media and some of the cons? Just kind of give both of us.
Sure. The pros of social media, I think, are pretty obvious. One is that communication is enhanced in a global way. So it's not just, in the past there's been focus on neighbors who are contiguous, who are next door. Now we can contact people in Japan, in Mexico. We have a professor here, for example, who does activism in Mexico, and I'm sure she's using social media to contact her people there. And so that communication on a global scale is a real pro. I also think that knowledge has become knowledge used to be in the domain of a certain elite class of people. You think of medieval texts, a few authors writing, a few people reading. now everybody is not only reading and writing, not entirely, but everybody's producing knowledge. So we're not just consumers of knowledge, we're producers, active producers, and that gives everyone a chance to be part of this wonderful experience of passing on and creating new knowledge. Personally, I like social media because many of these social media forms have to do with writing. Even email and Facebook involve writing. I think that's important. We're still using writing, even though Skyping is popular as well. Disadvantages, what are the cons? I think people believe that multitasking is the norm now, that they can be, for example, on their cell phones, maybe tweeting and doing other things, having appointments, talking to people on the phone. And what the research shows is we aren't really good multitaskers. We just think we are. So I'd say the imperative to multitask has been a danger. And I think the other problem is that sometimes people maybe reveal a little bit too much through social media, through Facebook, and so on. And we know that the web is constructed so that archives last a long, long time. And I do worry sometimes about the personal information students put on their Facebook sites, some things they don't want future employers to see. So I think that even though the con there is that the web seems like it's an ephemeral medium, but it's got a long memory. And I think we don't always think of it that way when we deal with social media.
Now tell me, when does social media become too much?
Okay, when does it become too much? That's a good question. I suppose it's interesting because it's hard to, I think interactive media and social media, which I see as slightly two different things, are closely related here. I can give the example of video game addiction, where we do know that a certain population of people are unable to leave their video games and feel compelled to continue. And what we see there is that people begin to have physical symptoms if they're not playing the game online. I think a social media as an analog would be if people feel that they have to do be communicating rather than being with people, rather than doing other valuable tasks, and if they feel deprivation from not being able to communicate. That's a definite sign of it's gone too far. If you feel stressed because you're not online, it's a sign. But it's probably you probably need to take a step back and take some me time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. How can we limit or put a hold or stop on having to tweet or post a status on Facebook?
I think the limits, it's a really good question. I think that scholars in the field are trying to grapple with that right now, so it is a cutting edge question in a way. And I think the problem with the limitation is a little bit interesting because workers sometimes use social media during work. And there have been many cases where people have been fired because they've been engaged in Facebook discussions and so on. So in that case, the limitations, termination can be a definite way to limit the use. I think on a more psychologically relevant level, going several hours without checking email, putting the phone in a different place, trying to limit the number of times that you're online per day, those are some strategies to use.